Welcome to the Oaktree Institute Podcast, the podcast designed to empower Muslim leaders through education and skill development. In this episode of the Oaktree Institute Podcast, we welcome our guest Tayyab Yunus. Tayyab is the founder and CEO of Intuitive IT Solutions and the founder of the Center on Muslim Philanthropy. He has over 20 years of experience in being hands-on and providing strategic guidance to both for-profit and non-profit organizations in the Muslim community and outside of the Muslim community. He holds an executive master's in business administration from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. We welcome Tayyab to speak to us today about how Muslim organizations, particularly nonprofits, can become more financially stable. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, Brother Tayyab Yunus. Jazakallah khair for joining us on this episode of the Oaktree Institute Podcast. We really appreciate your time.
Hey, assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me out, and thank you, Oaktree Institute, for doing something cool like this that's part of making the world a better place.
Allah Rakik, we really appreciate and you have a tremendous background, tremendous resume. You've done some amazing things in the community, a CEO, mashallah, founder of a nonprofit institution that works in the Muslim community. Can you speak to us a little bit about how did you get here? Can you speak to us about your journey and your passion for working in the Muslim community and how it led you to kind of be a leader in so many of these different institutions and the things that you're doing?
Man, so, doesn't it always somehow connect back to where we grew up and how we grew up, and then a big part of that is always our parents, right? And so I grew up in a philanthropic household. Dad came early 70s, and he was actually one of the founders of the Islamic Circle of North America. Mom, her family back home, they were teachers and scholars of hadith. Her parents were. And so both of them, the priority was always about, service to others. So I think that was a big part of it. The other part of it was, for some reason, my parents, they decided to move to the panhandle of Florida in this really super tiny town that was 15 miles off the border of Alabama, which is the part of Florida that really, a lot of my Florida colleagues are going to get upset about this, but it shouldn't be Florida. It really should be Alabama or Georgia. So growing up there were no Muslims. And we faced a lot of difficulties. And when we would come home, I would come home and talk to mom and dad about that. The typical response you would expect to hear from a parent when a child says, hey, these bad things are happening, is, hey, let's go back there and tell them they can't do this. My parents were focused on system change. They would say, if we leave here, if we go act and behave a certain way, then we might make right for us, but we need to think about how to make right for everyone else. Mm-hmm. And now, 20, 30 years later, I look back and in that town, alhamdulillah, the opinions of the people and even the other Muslims who have moved into this town and their children are going to these schools now. So that was really a big piece. Later on in high school, my dad kind of surrounded me with mentors, older brothers from other nearby towns. And as I usually call them influencers. And they were guys, older brothers who I could relate with and who I could have conversations with. And ultimately, one day I was inspired enough to find a way to feel comfortable in my skin being a Muslim. And that's really what I dealt with. Back in the 80s, it was, am I American? Am I Pakistani? Am I Muslim? What am I? And from there, the journey led me to meeting with some other brothers and connecting with guys all over the States, and ultimately led me to being a part of the group that founded and nationalized Young Muslims North America that you see today. And so that was the first sort of institution nonprofit or social good institution that I connected with at a very young age that was in startup.
Yeah.
And the journey just kept going from there.
Oh, that's an amazing. So when we first talked and we got to know each other, that was an astounding fact that I got to know about you, that you were one of the founders of YM. What was the driving? Like, what was it at the time? And you were so young, and obviously it was a different kind of world from a Muslim perspective, being Muslim in the U.S. What was the driving force behind that? Like, how did that come about? Where did the idea come from, and the drive, motivation come from?
When at a very young age, I would say the first sort of moment of truth for me was once upon a time. I was we would go to Pakistan in the summers and stuff like that. And one time I would go there, and I was with in these schools, and I was learning Quran in these schools, in one school, and in this one particular school, all the other kids were orphans. And one day my teacher, he said, why don't you go out and play with them in the park? And here I am, this sort of, somewhat, comfortable living, I won't say rich or wealthy, but comfortable living kid from America. And he says, go to the park. I'm thinking about what everyone else thinks about as a park: green grass, slides, swings,
Yeah.
a hoop.
Yeah.
So I go over to this park, and these guys are playing, and there's no grass, it's dirt, and they are playing with a tree limb that they've carved into a stick and a rock that they've carved into a ball. And I looked at this, I remember this vividly, even to this day, that it just felt wrong. And I'm like, how can these guys find entertainment value in this? And something's not right here. And what I did was, and I took all the kids to one of the sports shops. I said, come with me, guys. I went to the sports shop, and I went to the sports guy, and I said, hey, these guys are going to buy whatever they want. And I told the kids, I'm like, go in there and get what you want. And the shopkeeper looks at me and sees this 12, 13-year-old American kid. He's like, how are you going to pay for this? And I reached into my pocket. I took a wad of cash out that my parents had given me, a bunch of rupees, and I landed on the table, and he backs out of the way. All the 10, 20 guys, classmates, rushed the store. And the look on their face changed my life forever, because I remember one of the kids vividly, he walked out with a basketball, and he doesn't know how to play with it. And he's bouncing it like, what do you do with it? And a basketball hoop kit, and a soccer ball, and cricket bat. And they were just totally, at that moment, paradigm shift took place. And I would say that was probably the first moment where I experienced sort of finding joy in the joy of others.
Oh, no.
Finding joy in the joy of others. And when I experienced it, honestly, that I think became my drug.
I love that. That's amazing. I love that, finding joy in the joy of others. So that's the ultimate driver. That was the kind of the ultimate motivation. That's amazing. It's a powerful story, but it's an interesting that was the major influence in you helping others. That's amazing.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. I mean, that was the first time, and then what's crazy is I'm turning 40 this year. Alhamdulillah. And so I went on this journey to find out, what's the big deal about 40? What's the significance of 40? The Prophet ﷺ and many prophets, some say they were at the age of 40 when they got this. Turns out there's an ayah in the Quran. And, there's a very specific dua that Allah is telling us to say when we hit 40. And there's a piece in there at the end where some translations say, now declare yourself a Muslim. And it got me thinking a lot about what was I up until the age 40. And, I spoke to some of my mentors, and the bottom line is they what they really talk about is how, we're all on this journey up until 40, where we're working on figuring out, what's our superpower. And this is how I define it now, is you got to figure out what is that super skill Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you, and then how are you going to use that super skill to make a difference in the world. And then by the time you get to 40, now now these are going to be the best years of your life, inshallah, where the wisdom has settled in, and now you focus on making a difference. That really is front and center for me right now. I really have feel like I've got clarity in what I've got to do and how I've got to do it, and ballpark the best next 23 years of my life I got to make out of it.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. And mashallah, you have some amazing experiences. Of course, you're a CEO of your own company. You're leading the Center on Muslim Philanthropy, doing some amazing work in the Muslim community. You've been in the Muslim community for a long time. You've established one of the hallmark youth organizations in the Muslim community. So what have been your overall lessons? Like, what have you learned? What are the top lessons that you've learned, and in your experiences within the Muslim community, what you've learned? What are the key takeaways that you've gotten?
Yeah, number one, can't be great at everything. You've got to really figure out, you can be good at a few things. You can be okay at a lot of things. But if you really want to make a difference and you want to achieve some level of greatness, what I mean by greatness, I don't mean like legacy here in this world, right? I'm about the after game too. You got to think about what is going to be that skill that I'm going to hone in on to make great. So my dad actually, I have an awesome relationship with my dad right now. And for years he would say, you should learn Arabic, you should memorize the Quran. And one day I said to him, I said, Abu, if I study Arabic and study Quran and become a scholar of Arabic Fusha and a scholar of Quran, who's going to be the scholar of social entrepreneurship? Who's going to be the scholar of philanthropy and nonprofit management? I'm like, and he totally agreed, and then later on, he taught me the principle of Fard Kifaya and how we need to look for, something that's not being solved in society and how to go and fix that. So that's the first lesson. When we're kids in school, the whole system tries to force us to think that we need to be A's at everything. But the reality is lopsidedness is okay, and specialization is okay. And we see this from the Sunnah of the Prophet, right? When he needed intel, he got the guys together that were great at getting intel. When he needed a writer, a memorizer, a builder, a plower, a business person, he had specialists all around him, and he leveraged the whole team to make a difference, to build the institution. Similarly, so that's how I think, and that's my advice is, don't try to be everything to everyone. Think about really how you want to make a difference. The second lesson is, this is at a very young age in my life, I had a mentor come to me and he said, Tayyab, who's your favorite Marvel character? And I said, Wolverine. And he said, why Wolverine? What was his, his superpower? And I said, well, his claws. And he goes, was it really his claws? I'm like, yeah, man, he had claws. He was strong. He beat everybody up. And he said, think back to the last scene of the comic. And at that time, it was the comics. It wasn't the movies yet. He goes, think back to the last scene of any of the comic books. Remember how when the world was almost over and it was going to be because this radioactive chamber was going to explode. And, the only way to stop it was because somebody needed to go into the chamber, live long enough to make it to the end and hit this red button to turn this thing off. Who would go into the chamber? And I said, Wolverine, of course. And then he would say, well, was it his claws that allowed him to live through that chamber? And I stopped and I said, well, no, I guess it wasn't the claws. And he says, what was it? And I said, well, it was his ability, his superhuman healing ability. And then my mentor leaned down to my face and he said, Tayyab, similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you a superpower. And he goes, right now, it's in a raw format. It is a raw talent. He goes, you've got to discover it. And that's going to be a journey. It's going to take you time to figure it out. And just sometimes you think you've got it figured out, but it's really not what it is. But you've got a raw talent. And when you find that raw talent, he goes, you've got to sharpen it into a skill, Tayyab. And when you get it finally to a skill, you're going to have a choice, and Shaitan's going to come to you. Because you're going to have a choice. Do I use this skill to benefit me, or do I use this skill to serve humanity, to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And so that's the second big lesson as there's stuff on my LinkedIn profile that's not even there. I bought and sold T-Mobile stores. I bought and sold other commercial retail businesses, properties. And, I'll tell you that at the end of the day, it's really about how do you use your skill to make the world a better place and make that your superpower. So that's my other lesson that I've learned and that I advise and coach everybody on is hone in on your super skill. Find that cause that you care about. Connect the cause that you care about to your super skill and make a difference in that area.
I love that. I mean, that's some amazing advice. I think particularly for young people that get confused on what they want to do or looking to do a lot of things. I love that kind of that line on you can be average at a lot of things or you can be great in one thing and trying to find that superpower. I love that term. Be able to harness it within yourself, foster it, and serve the world through it. SubhanAllah, it's a basic thing. Allah has created us that way. It's an amazing, amazing thing. So one of your super skills, one of your superpowers is working with Muslim nonprofit organizations, right? Allowing them to excel, level up, go to that next level through whether it's management and I know fund development. Those are some of the two areas that you specialize in and focus on. And I know we've had podcasts before and some guests before, and we talked about like all the problems of organizations in the Muslim community, right? And there's so many of them. But we really appreciate that you have a specialty in an area that's allowing them to excel. So I want to talk about that. So so tell us first about some of the work you do with Muslim organizations and nonprofit institutions. What do you do exactly? Let us know a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we're, in the most simplest explanation, we're focused on capacity building. Al-Hibri Foundation did some amazing research, which basically says in the American Muslim nonprofit sector, 90% of these nonprofit organizations do not have enough resources to fulfill their mission. And many of them, even though they've been around for 10, 20, even 30 years, they're stuck in the entrepreneurial stage. They still haven't. The time doesn't matter. How they look, act, and behave and what they have towards their mission basically showcases that they're stuck in early stage startup mode. They don't have enough resources to fulfill their mission. So the work is broadly focused on capacity building. When we think about nonprofit organizations, capacity means do they have the resources to achieve their mission? Usually nonprofit organizations, resources means human resources. So it's not that they need money. It's that they need people and talent to deliver their services. Therefore, they need money, right? So we redefine capacity, we reframe and look for what is capacity, what resources does this organization need, and then we help develop that capacity. Now, in the Muslim nonprofit sector, in the most simplest explanation, if you want to improve the capacity of an organization, there's literally three areas that you work on, right? One is, let's just take an Islamic school, for example. Let's take a civil rights organization, for example, right? These are all service-oriented. Yeah, they need to buy infrastructure, and that's why you'll have those capital campaigns that buy the infrastructure. But once you have the infrastructure, now it's all service-oriented, right? So it's payroll. So if you want to improve the capacity of an organization, one area that you focus on is you upskill the existing human resources so that they are working smarter, not harder, right? So that they are doing more with less, right? So that's one area of improving the capacity of an organization is you upskill your existing staff. The second area where you improve capacity is you solve the revenue streams, right? So we look at an organization and say, what is your revenue? Is it all fundraising? Is it some fundraising? And then do you have earned income? Nowadays, like an Islamic school, for example, tuition is earned income, and then they'll have a budget gap, and then they need to raise money for the budget gap, right? That's where the fundraising comes in.
Right.
But, so a nonprofit's either going to have a revenue stream of fundraising only, or they're going to have fundraising and earned income, or earned income only, right? So we consider grants and money from foundations as part of fundraising as well. It's just that at the end of the day, there's a person on the other side approving that money going out from some foundation that someone left. So that's fundraising and earned income. So if you want to improve the capacity, then you improve the fundraising strategy, for example. So those are the two pieces of capacity building. The third piece that we focus on is increasing the total available human capacity. Increasing the total available human capacity of an organization. Nonprofits have a luxury that for-profits don't. For-profits, they can't get free labor.
Right.
Nonprofits can. Nonprofits can do volunteer raisers. And so if they invest in a volunteer resource strategy, then now they've increased their total available human capacity. So in the for-profit world, you have managers, when they think about implementing strategy and when they think about faces in the right places, their entire frame is how many people can I hire based on my budget. But in the nonprofit world, it's about coming up with strategy, faces in the right places, leveraging budget for payroll, but also budget towards increasing volunteer engagement and putting faces in the right places through your volunteer resource strategy. So these are the three areas of how we're doing capacity building. Upskilling existing staff in an organization, board development work, leadership development work, project management level work, or execution level work, or tactical level upskilling. How do we upskill all of these layers of an organization? Number two is how do we improve the revenue system? How do we improve those? And third is how do we increase total available human capacity through a volunteer resource strategy?
Amazing. I mean, so these are like the three pillars that I like that you use pillars. These are like the three pillars that you work across. So I want to just dive in a little bit deeper so that we can kind of we have a lot of people that they're youth director in a community, or they're a board member, or they establish a social justice organization like you mentioned. So that first one about upskilling their talent, or their human resources. So how does somebody begin doing that, or where does that start? Does it start at the top? Does it start? Where does it start in the community? What if everybody's volunteer? Where does somebody start if they don't know where to start doing that?
So first thing that I'm doing is I would probably inventory, or get some sort of assessment or a pulse on, my team, right? My total available human capacity. Most nonprofits, you're going to have a board, you're going to have some executive director or slash CEO, and then you're going to have then you're going to have some other staff in the organization, right? And so I would do some level of assessment to see where everyone's at. Some people, the other principle we have to remember is something I call the 3 E's of excellence, or ihsan, when you're talking about a person having mastery in something, right? And the 3 E's, like if I want to be an amazing baker, for example, right? First thing I need is education. That's information. I need a recipe. But just because I have a recipe offline about Florida key lime pie doesn't mean that when I bake that Florida key lime pie, it's going to be an awesome key lime pie. By the way, this happened to me. In the recipe, it talks about, whipping the egg, the white. And so I'm trying to do this thing, and it's not getting done right. Later, I have to call my daughter and say, hey, what does this mean, fluff the egg white? And she goes, Dad, first of all, you need a metal bowl because it won't fluff in a plastic bowl. So what's happening here is I'm going through the second E, which is exposure or mentorship. So my daughter Alia, she's mentoring me and coaching me on what the recipe means. And then just because I read a recipe, I got the education. Just because I saw I had a mentor or I got exposure to how to do it, And I saw Alia how to teaching me how to do it. Doesn't mean I'm still amazing at it yet. I need to cross the third year, E, which is experience, street knowledge, right? I got to go through the process, learning by doing, reflect on my mistakes. And so I've done education, exposure, and experience. These three things will help me get closer to mastery of baking, for example. Similarly, when we're thinking about our total available human talent in our organization, we need to think across these three things. If I've got a board that's low performing, I can't just, send them off to a board retreat, let them come out and be like, man, we spent all these nonprofit dollars on a board retreat and they're still, never returning to our calls. They're not reviewing reports. They're not thinking about strategy and vision. They're just, you're still going to need exposure and you're still going to need experience.
Right.
And so that exposure is the coaching and development. So, how we bring that to life nowadays is, assess everybody in the organization and then assess them across these three E's. And then after you've assessed them across these three E's, then you fill in the gaps. If I were to just give you one prescription, the best dollars you'll invest in as an organization is get them a coach. So I and some of the other faculty members, what we're doing is just have a weekly call with executive directors, with board chairs, with development directors, a weekly call where we are talking through, what challenges are you facing? Where are we at with the plan? What's working? What's not working? What's green, yellow, red? Let's really talk about the red stuff. The yellow stuff, do we need to talk about it now? Do we talk about it next week? Where do we need to be week by week? And sort of coach them through, the art of execution. Execution is an art. It's not a science. Planning is a science.
Yeah.
You can plan the hell out of things. Right?
Yeah.
You can plan all day long things, but execution is a science. So.
I love that. And what are some of the results? How is that? How are you measuring success, and how successful are people going through this process with you?
Yeah. So a couple of things. As Muslims, we understand that outcomes are from Allah.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? We understand that outcomes are from Allah. And by the way, I went through this process. So I'm a social entrepreneur. I'm a young entrepreneur. I'm an American Muslim first generation guy thinking that, I shouldn't say this, but I used to call them uncles and aunties who set up these organizations. I don't call them uncles anymore. I respect and love my community builders and institutional builders. But back then when I was a kid, I used to think that everything that was done before was done wrong. And I spent all my time focused on trying to control uncertainties, weed out uncertainties, and focus on results. One day, my mom gave me this book, and she said, this is a book that your grandfather wrote. And the title of the book is Qadar wa Qada. And in this book, which is not published anywhere, by the way, she said this is the only surviving copy that my father wrote, and she gave it to me. The bottom line of this book, the takeaway that I understand from this book, is basically outcomes are already predetermined. And my mind got blown because I've gone through an entire system, and I'm a CEO who plans everything around outcomes. And now you're telling me that I have no control over outcomes? And for the longest time, I was like, what do I have control over? Right? If I don't have control over outcomes, what do I have control over? And the short of that journey is Allah has told us. He's told us what to focus on. 3 things. Number 1, have an awesome intention. Number 2, make high quality choices and do your best. That's it. So high quality choices and do your best around good intention.
Yeah.
So your question was, how do you measure the work? Well, when plans don't turn out the way we hoped for, What we evaluate is performance in the execution.
Mm.
I have employed this concept in my for-profit businesses and in my nonprofit businesses. And the result ultimately is, number one, less stressful team members, right? Because we fundamentally, as human beings, we do not have control over outcomes, right? So I measure performance when things work out as planned or didn't work out as planned based on how well did we execute. Did we do the research? Did we do our homework? Did we make high quality choices? Did we playbook the implementation and the execution? Did we operationalize the plan? Did we have faces in the right places? And if we did all those things right, then whether things turned out the way they did or didn't, we're not worried about. So that's a principle that I live by. But in terms of the work that we're doing, from the stories and the research that when we started a longer-term research at Indiana University, we've now established something called the Muslim Philanthropy Initiative. And alhamdulillah, we're now performing. We've got our first full-time assistant professor and director there, and we're starting a research project, to really study, how well are these organizations performing, and the ones that are attending our classes and our programming, are we really making a difference? So that study is going to tell us. Other than that, I can say, here's stories and examples of people where we made a difference. So we believe we are.
That's amazing, and I love the philosophy. I think that's super important. We of course we could plan. I love the idea of making the right decisions. Of course, the effort is super important. But at the end of the day, of course, the results are in Allah's hands, and I think those are three essential ingredients. I love that, and I think that's super important for as a mindset for any person working in the Muslim community. I think that's really important. So I appreciate you sharing that. So then we talked about a second pillar, which is, and I think maybe we can focus here for kind of the rest of the conversation, because I know that's one of the more important highlights. Not a lot of people do a lot of content for the Muslim community around fund development and the strategies. And so you mentioned that there was two essential parts here. Obviously, there's the revenue stream, and then there's the fundraising. So first, how do you assess where an organization is at? And then how do you kind of guide them towards create a plan for them so that they can move forward in terms of their fund development and how they can grow generally in terms of at least their financial capacity?
So when we're assessing an organization, focusing on fundraising, we're assessing fundraising at an organization. A couple of things we look at is we do a 3 to 5 year performance review on things like donor size, how many donors do you have, and at what level are your donors giving. And the Lilly School of Philanthropy, one of the things that we teach is that there's something called an ideal donor mix, and so when we're assessing an organization, and the ideal donor mix tells us that an organization is performing really well from a fundraising perspective, right? So that's the sort of benchmark. And if I were to simplify it just in this conversation, you have major gifters, mid-level gifters, and what we call base level gifters, right? And so, for example, we'll assess an organization and say, your base is really large, your mid is small, and your major gifters are really, really small. Actually, some of the research now says that only 2% of the American Muslim community gives more than $10,000. Which sometimes we think it's a lot more, but only 2% give more than $10,000.
And that's annually. That's annually in total, or annually to one organization?
Annually in total.
Annually in total. And so how would you, so for your I don't want to say run of the mill, but for your normal Muslim, center or Islamic school, what is it? So how would you differentiate between major, that middle, and that minor? What is the differentiation points, at least generally?
Okay. Yeah. So so each organization will have a different major gift threshold,
Okay.
right? So the major gift threshold, and the way you come up with that is basically on the ideal pyramid mix, which basically says 10% of your donors should be giving 60% of your revenue. And then the percentages shift as you go down the pyramid. So when we assess an organization, what we're doing is we're looking at where their major gift threshold is. The second thing that we do is we ask them, what is your fundraising goal for the next year? And let's say they come back and they say it's $100,000, or let's say it's $1 million, right? So there is an actual science. Remember, planning is a science, right? So there's an actual science to setting up your gift sizes, and we use something called a gift range chart. The gift range chart tells you how many donors you need at what level, right? So let's say you have an organization. I'm actually working with an organization right now. They raised 600,000, and now they're saying they want to raise $1 million. And so when we assessed their database, we found out that their base was according to industry benchmarks, best practices. Their mid-levels was really fat, and their major gift was really tiny. And then when we looked at the $1 million that they needed to raise, we said your existing donor pool cannot support $1 million. So then we come up with the campaign strategies, which are, either we've got to decide to reduce our goal and modify our budget, cut back, or we say we're going to keep the goal at $1 million. And now we need to think about those fundraising strategies to grow the base, grow the total pyramid to hit that $1 million at all those three levels. And then there's renewal campaigns that you do, upgrade campaigns that you do, there's cultivation campaigns that you do. The other thing that we teach, when we're talking, so that's the evaluation piece, when you're talking about how do you assess the organization, that's really the gist, in a nutshell, the gist of it, right?
I love that. And by the way, just before we move on to then what do you do? I love that you're analyzing in this way, right? It's not just like stand up and just fundraise, and whoever comes in, it comes in. And then let's just say a $5 million project. Hey, what the heck, right? I think there's just I don't want to say a recklessness at times, but there's just definitely not conscious thought done at times when Muslims take on certain endeavors, particularly projects or different organizations. So that's very nuanced. I appreciate that. So then what? So then when it comes to the execution, what should they do? How do they execute in terms of, at least I think a goal is like financial health. How do you get an organization to financial health?
So a couple of things. One is that, paradigm shift. The research basically says that Muslims largely give emotionally and episodically, right? Which that is a strategy that has worked, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if it is still working, and the prescription that I give to my nonprofits, by the way, is I say, don't stop doing what you're doing. Build the new strategy for the future, right? If something is working to a certain degree, it may not be working amazingly well, but it is still working and it's sustaining your organization.
Right.
You keep doing it, and then you build the new system. But at the Lilly School of Philanthropy, one of the things that we teach and talk about and that we implement with nonprofits is we help our nonprofits move from thinking about fundraising as having a fundraiser, but rather and moving to thinking about fundraising as a system, just like we think about accounting as a system in a business. Marketing is a system. These are business functions of an organization. Sales is a system. It's a process, right? So we teach, like in most of our classes, even the Center of Muslim Philanthropy, the first hour or two, our content is paradigm shifting content. Because when we first started delivering the content, we realized that our audience was in a certain paradigm, and we're delivering content and they're not moving through the content well, we modified our curriculum to start off with paradigm shift, then building the blocks on the new system. So that's the first piece. Is you asked about how do we build financial sustainability? Well, number one, move from thinking about fundraising being achieved with a fundraiser in a room with as many people as you can get at the best time of the year, to thinking about your revenue, your fundraising as a system. And then how do we build that system? So that's number one. And this system basically has 4 major steps, milestones or pieces in it, right? So number one is prospecting. So there's a whole bunch of activities associated with prospecting new donors, prospecting potential donors. The second step is cultivating. How do we cultivate these prospects to ready them to be, and this is the third step, which is solicit. So prospect, cultivate, solicit. And then the last piece, which is one of the most important pieces that we don't do as well job as we should, is stewardship. Right? I often stand in my classes and I'll ask this question and I'll say, how many of you are experiencing donor fatigue? And man, almost everybody in the class every single time raises their hand.
Absolutely.
And then I say to them, I said, we believe donor fatigue doesn't exist. What actually exists is something called donor abuse. Donor abuse is the result of going to a person over and over and over again and asking them for money, and you haven't stewarded them. And stewardship is how you fulfill the value exchange experience for a donor, right? Retail corporations don't have this problem. Whenever Apple sold Tayyab this iPhone, and Tayyab gave Apple money, now Tayyab is experiencing value exchange with the iPhone.
Right.
The nonprofit problem is that the donor doesn't experience value exchange at the time the money is transferred. And if you're always going back to your donor and asking for money, and they're not experiencing the value exchange of your organization, then you can expect them to lose trust in you and to not be willing to donate to you anymore.
Absolutely.
They're going to donate where they experience value better, and that's the stewardship strategy that's built in.
I love that. So those are 4 amazing ones. You went into the stewardship, and I love the analogy and the thought there. So can you talk us through the other 3? Prospecting. So the first one is prospecting, which is what you're hunting for people that are believing your cause, is essentially.
So prospecting, yes, prospecting is about identifying potential donors. And, I can't tell you how many times, organizations will contact us and say, hey, can you help us with fundraising? I'm like, yeah. And I'll say, so what are you guys doing now? Where do you need help? They said, we need help finding new donors. I'm like, what are you doing now? Well, we're on social media. And, we have 5,000 followers on social media, but we only have 150 donors. And, there's this sort of notion that all the donors in the world are so easily accessible online. So we need to get online and do all this social media, and therefore they'll all show up and want to donate to us. But the reality is that's not how it works. What we teach is another paradigm shift, that each organization has something called a constituency universe. And your donors are in your universe. Your universe matters, not the internet universe, not the Facebook universe. Your universe matters. And this is somewhat of a page right out of basic marketing principles, which is know who your customer is and know where they are and reach them, right? So in this constituency, we do it in our class, we teach, and what I use and apply with the nonprofits that I work with is something called a constituency mapping exercise. And through this constituency mapping exercise, we fundamentally identify donor segments and there's a very important principle that we use when we go through the exercise, and we teach called LIA, link, interest, and ability. You might identify Bill Gates as a donor, right? So we can answer the ability question, right? But we don't know if he would be interested in our Islamic school, right? But none of that matters if we're not linked with it. So when we're doing this constituency mapping exercise, we're solving, and when we're prospecting, we're solving link, interest, and ability. That's the key fundamental question. And then the other thing, if you asked about cultivation, cultivation, because we don't cultivate donors, we're also committing donor abuse. Cultivation basically means, investing in discovering donor interest. The first class that I took at the Lilly School of Philanthropy, the first introduction, one of the instructors and professors came out there and said, "Hey, raise your hands if you're a fundraiser." And everybody in the audience, including myself, we raised our hands. We said we're fundraisers. And she said, by the time you finish my class, you will no longer call yourself a fundraiser, because we at the school, we call ourselves dream makers. And I was like, what is she talking about? What we learned, and now I'm experiencing, is she said, donors have a dream of a better world. And our job is to discover their dream and help them bring their dream of a better world to life. And that's the principal concept behind cultivation. Cultivation is about discovering that prospect's dream of a better world, and then learning about how that can happen and connecting their dream with our organization's cause and ability. So if I'm cultivating a potential donor, right? Like, for example, one of my brothers, right? As I'm investing time in cultivating him, I find out that he really cares about, convert care. This is the exact word he said. Because I care about convert care. And so now I know that if I have any of my nonprofits that I work with that are working in convert care, I have his interest. I'm linked to him because it's my brother. And then I know he has the ability because, well, I won't say on the air why I know, but I do know I'm his brother, right? So, but I'm not going to pick him like, a project that doesn't link with, that falls outside the scope of that.
Right. Absolutely.
My father, for example, he principally believes in masjid. Helping build a masjid equals home in paradise. I can take him any masjid project, alhamdulillah, and he'll always write a check, no matter, whatever he can do. So cultivation is about uncovering the donor's interest and aligning your organization's interest to that donor. Right?
Amazing.
And then the other piece is solicitation. Solicitation is about the right person asking the right donor for the right gift at the right time in the right way. These are the 6 rights of fundraising. The 6 rights. The right person asking the right donor for the right gift in the right way, in the right place. So these are the rights of fundraising that's there. So, and board involvement is absolutely critical when we talk about major gifts. Board involvement is huge. Board Source, these guys have done some amazing work. I think Oaktree, you guys are also, teaching about these subjects. But Board Source has done some great work on, how important it is that these boards, in addition to their other responsibilities, focus on major gift work. So in those organizations where I'm coaching and developing the chief development officer, or I'm building a development department for that organization, or I'm teaching all the staff and certifying them, we talk about that. How do you engage board members and involve them in the process of these 4 steps?
I love it. I mean, that's tremendous insights. Very, very valuable. I mean, the breakdowns are really important. Again, I don't. It's amazing that y'all are doing some of this amazing work. I think like there's such a gap in this area in terms of just like you mentioned, education. I mean, we have a lot of experience, a lot of some bad experience, but we being educated, having that exposure, that mentorship, that coaching around this, and then being able to kind of experience it. I think that's I try to tie both of them together, but I think our institutions, our leadership, just generally needs to understand some of these mechanisms and how these work. And tremendously insightful. So, kind of just to kind of begin to kind of close on the conversation, what should or what is uh, uh, the main place that somebody should start? Is it by getting trained on this? Is it by kind of getting somebody to be sponsored at a school? How do you advise an institution, a masjid, a Islamic school? How do you advise them to start? Where should they start in kind of sorting their financial crises or financial problems out?
Yeah. so so I'm gonna give three things. Number one, when I finished my MBA and I came off the stage, I was one of the I gave the speech at the graduation. I came off the stage. One of my professors and mentors, basically said to me, he said, "They remember the arrogant mind doesn't learn." And I said to him, what? I looked at him like this, like, what does that mean? And he looked at me and he said, because it doesn't ask the right question, right? And so my advice is, don't allow Shaitan to tell you that you've achieved success. That this is the biggest problem, and I think, and I'm working in the Muslim community and the non-Muslim community, and what I see that worries me, and I think I understand why it happens, because we started from nothing. And when you start from nothing and you work really hard and you get somewhere, where you are, you just can't let it go, and, and you can't change it. That's a success mindset, right?
Yeah.
So that's my first piece of advice. Is Woolworth, Sears Roebuck, Kmart. Don't be like them. Don't think you're too awesome to fail.
Yeah.
The reality is most American Muslim nonprofits, they don't have the revenue equal to the size of one corner McDonald's. So this notion that we're so big, we're so awesome, we've got to abandon that. There's so much more. There's so much more you'll find as soon as you embrace the idea that you don't know what you don't know. So go out there and learn it. That's number one.
I love that.
Number two, I would say is find out what you don't know. Like you said, the easiest thing to do is go attend a seminar or a workshop. Go get some information. That is the easiest thing to do. And Shaitan's going to fight you. Does not want you to be successful. I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, I want you guys to remember two things. One, you have one enemy. No one else in this world is your enemy, period. You have one enemy. And then I tell them, remember, your enemy has one strategy, one recipe. That's it. And if you embrace this, you'll see him coming every single time. And that is the art of distraction, right? So don't allow yourself to be distracted from the objective and the goal. You chase that goal down like you can taste it. So once you've abandoned the idea that you know everything and now you're ready to go find the answer, don't let anything distract you. Don't overthink it. Go find any workshop or any seminar by Oaktree, by Center of Muslim Philanthropy, by Muslim Philanthropy Initiative, or any other organization around fundraising, nonprofit management, and just go there and attend that workshop. The third thing I would say is you don't have to go out and hire and recruit some, amazing nonprofit, magician from some huge nonprofit corporation that's got 50 years of experience. You don't need to do that, right? The data already tells me that 90% of American Muslim nonprofits don't have enough resources to succeed. So don't take what little resources you have and go hire somebody for 6 figures or hire some consultant that's billing you 7 figures an hour.
Yeah.
To just come in and tell you how to do stuff that you just can't get done anyway because you don't have the capacity. So my third recommendation is get a good coach. Get a good coach, right? Invest in a coach for your team. That's really what you need. Somebody who they can go to who isn't who can coach them through the process of building a fundraising system at your organization. So delete this idea from your mind that you just need some fancy fundraiser and get them in front of the largest audience on the planet and you're going to hit your budget, or you're going to go find some Cinderella donor with millions of dollars that's going to just bankroll your organization for years and years and years. Those things, they could happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can make anything happen, but what he expects of us is that we make high quality decisions and we plan and we execute as best as possible, and that's done by implementing a fundraising system. And you can do that with your own staff if you can get them some education and get them a good coach to take them through the knowledge in your content.
I love that. Amazing. Really, really amazing gems and extremely important, valuable information. I think this is definitely some of the best content that we've got somebody come on and share, particularly in terms of organizational performance and how to transform themselves. Where can people access you? We'll put it in the show notes and kind of make sure that everybody has access to this. But where can people reach out to you for the work you're doing and kind of if they need any coaching or if they need any training, where should they go?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, they can email me, and I do a lot of one-on-one coaching and mentorship, even through my WhatsApp. I've got folks who will send me voice notes, and I'll send a voice note back. So I'm comfortable with you putting my number out there. I'm all about capacity building in the American Muslim nonprofit sector. So I'm totally comfortable with you publishing my email, even publishing my cell phone and asking folks to come to my WhatsApp. You could publish my LinkedIn or even intuitive.solutions or muslimphilanthropy.org. Either of those you could publish. Inshallah, and they can reach out. You can get on my schedule. My executive assistant knows to prioritize, these sort of thought leadership conversations. So if you emailed me and said, hey, I'd like to get a half hour, an hour on Tayyab's schedule, it will happen, inshallah. So please reach out. This is why I believe I'm here and how I'm trying to get my ticket to Jannah is by, helping others become, my vision statement for myself is I'm imagining a better world brought to life by high-performing individuals and high-performing institutions focused on creating social value, right? And I'll tell you one last thing, and you can cut this out or leave it if you want, man.
Yeah,
but
that's good.
a long time ago, I was thinking about, the story that, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could send a sinning man or a sinning woman to Jannah for feeding a starving cat or a starving dog, then the ticket to Jannah is actually one sincere act, not even to a human being. And that drove me to think about how can I give out tickets to Jannah? How can I engage people into pursuing one single act of service to humanity or to the animal kingdom or to the world? And that's kind of what People Greater Than Profit is about, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
People Greater Than Profit is about getting everyone, Muslims and non-Muslims, into adopting a people greater than profit or a purpose greater than profit lifestyle. So Hey man, thank you very much.
I
By the
love
way,
it. I
Jazakallah
appreciate it. Jazakallah
khair.
khair, and may Allah bless you and give you strength and allow you to continue amazing work that you're
Ameen,
doing. And
ameen.
may
You
Allah
too, man.
accept from you and continue to allow
Ameen,
grow your capacity. You know, it's
ameen,
a quote that
inshallah.
I say a lot at the end of these interviews. May Allah make your back stronger so you can carry more. And I think that's something that we hope and pray for, inshallah ta'ala.
Ameen, ameen.
Barakallah
Thank you
fikum.
so much. You too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Oaktree Institute Podcast. For more episodes, subscribe and follow us on Apple, Google Play, and Spotify. And for other content that we have, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.